This week, 2024 Campaign Trail introduces you to two political influencers on the TikTok platform, with large audiences on the left and right, and from Plano, Texas, independent Cornel West meeting with voters. But first, a look at results from Super Tuesday. Former President Trump notched wins in all of the Super Tuesday states except one, Vermont, which his rival Nikki Haley took. That wasn't enough to keep her campaign going, though. She announced on Wednesday that she'd be ending her quest for the White House. Next, her remarks from Charleston, South Carolina, where she declined to endorse former President Trump, saying it was now his responsibility to appeal to those who voted for her.
Good morning. Just over a year ago, I launched my campaign for president. When I began, I said the campaign was grounded in my love for our country. Just last week, my mother, a first-generation immigrant, got to vote for her daughter for president. Only in America. I am filled with the gratitude for the outpouring of support we've received from all across our great country. But the time has now come to suspend my campaign. I said I wanted Americans to have their voices heard. I have done that. I have no regrets. And although I will no longer be a candidate, I will not stop using my voice for the things I believe in. Our national debt will eventually crush our economy. A smaller federal government is not only necessary for our freedom, it is necessary for our survival. The road to socialism is the road to ruin for America. Our Congress is dysfunctional and only getting worse. It is filled with followers, not leaders. Term limits for Washington politicians are needed now more than ever. Our world is on fire because of America's retreat. Standing by our allies in Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan is a moral imperative. But it's also more than that. If we retreat further, there will be more war, not less. As important, while we stand strong for the cause of freedom, we must bind together as Americans. We must turn away from the darkness of hatred and division. I will continue to promote all those values, as is the right of every American. I sought the honor of being your president. But in our great country, being a private citizen is privilege enough in itself. And that's a privilege I very much look forward to enjoying. In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I wish anyone well who would be America's president. Our country is too precious to let our differences divide us. I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice when she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd. Always make up your own mind." It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that. At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people. This is now his time for choosing. I end my campaign with the same words I began it, from the book of Joshua. I direct them to all Americans, but especially to so many of the women and girls out there who put their faith in our campaign. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for God will be with you wherever you go. In this campaign, I have seen our country's greatness. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, America. God bless you.
Ms. Haley's departure from the race prompted this statement from President Biden's re-election campaign. He said in part that unlike his Republican rival, former President Donald Trump, he welcomed Nikki Haley's supporters to vote for him, Quote, "I want to be clear. There is a place for them in my campaign," he said. Next, a portion of Donald Trump's Super Tuesday victory remarks, delivered from his Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida.
Well, thank you very much. They call it Super Tuesday for a reason. This is a big one. And they tell me, the pundits and otherwise, that there's never been one like this. There's never been anything so conclusive. This was an amazing night, an amazing day. It's been an incredible period of time in our country's history. It's been sad in so many ways, but I think it's going to be inspiring because we're going to do something that, frankly, nobody's been able to do for a long time. We've watched our country take a great beating over the last 3 years, and nobody thought a thing like this would be possible. We wouldn't have Russia attacking Ukraine. We wouldn't have Israel being attacked. Iran, as you know, was broke. When I was running things, they were broke. They didn't have money for Hamas. They didn't have money for Hezbollah. We had no inflation. Inflation is destroying the middle class. It's destroying everything. Supplying oil to Europe, all over the world. And then a tragic thing happened during the election. It was a tragedy because you wouldn't have, think of it, all of the problems that you have today, I don't think you would have had any of them. You'd only have success. And that's what's ultimately going to unify this country and unify this party. We have a great Republican Party with tremendous talent, and we want to have unity, and we're going to have unity, and it's going to happen very quickly. Our country was coming together. Our country was coming together. And now we have a very divided country. We have a country that a political person uses weaponization against his political opponent. Never happened here. It happens in other countries, but they're third world countries. And in some ways, we're a third world country. We're a third world country at our borders, and we're a third world country at our elections. And we have to stop that. We need a fair and free press. The press has not been fair, nor has it been free, but maybe someday they will be. They're being beaten up pretty badly. People aren't trusting them. They're not believing them. And really, it's a very important factor. The press used to be the policeman. It used to police our country. Now nobody has confidence in them, and we have to get that confidence back. It's so important for the success of our country. So important. November 5th is going to go down as the single most important day in the history of our country. We're going to take it and we're going to make it like it should be, respected. Right now, we're not respected. Right now, our country is known as a joke. We have people coming into our country that just shouldn't be here, but many, and I say many, large percentages, they come in through the caravans, they come in many different ways. Now we find out again, they come in through airplanes, we send them in. This is crazy. But they come into our country, we're going to stop them. We're going to close our borders. We're going to have to deport a lot of people, a lot of bad people, because our countries can't live like this. Our cities are choking to death. Our states are dying. And frankly, our country is dying. And we're going to make America great again, greater than ever before. Thank you very much. It's been a big night. Thank you very much.
Former President Trump and his campaign also took control of the Republican National Committee this week, as ally Michael Whatley, a former general counsel for the RNC, took over as chair from longtime head Ronna McDaniel. Laura Trump, the former president's daughter-in-law, took over as co-chair of the national organization. Next, some of Mr. Whatley and Mrs. Trump's remarks from the group's spring meeting in Houston, immediately following their election to their new positions.
I want to open this morning with several notes of gratitude. First, I want to thank the members of the RNC for entrusting me with this position at this critical time. I have been overwhelmed by the support and encouragement that I've received over the past couple of weeks as I have talked to the members of the committee. Knowing that I have the opportunity to work with and for all of you is both humbling and exciting. I want to thank Ronna McDaniel for her grace and vision as our chair for the past 7 years. From the moment that I stepped onto this committee in 2019, she has been a friend and a mentor, and I am grateful for her leadership and service to the Republican Party and our candidates across the country. I would also like to thank my family, Suzanne, Michael, George, and Mary Kate. Although they could not be with us here today, school still calls. They've been amazingly supportive, and I could not even contemplate this journey without having them beside me. Finally, I would like to thank President Trump for his trust and support. There is no one who has been more focused on fighting for the American people, and I am grateful for the opportunity to work with him to win and help revitalize our great nation.
But I just want to say again, thank you for entrusting me in this position. I promise to work hard. I promise to do everything within my power. We need to make sure that nothing is left to question on November 5th, that we aren't playing catch up, that we have the votes banked, that everyone feels like when they went in to vote that day, their vote counted. And that's what we are going to do. So I look forward over the next 241 days to working alongside each and every one of you. I also want to say thank you very quickly. I would be remiss if I didn't thank President Donald J. Trump, right? Because I'll tell you, he called me about this position. And I never, if he would have asked me 2 months ago, would you ever have considered doing this? I would have said, I don't really know. It wasn't something I ever thought about. But I also never realized that we would be in this space in our country right now. And if this is where my best use is, and this is where we're going to have to fight the most, this is where I want to be. I want to be in this fight alongside of all of you. I'm proud to do it. I'm excited to be here. I'm ready to get to work. 241 days to victory, ladies and gentlemen. Let's make America great again. Let's expand our lead in the House, take back the Senate, and let's put Donald J. Trump back in that White House. Thank you, guys. Thank you. It's an honor.
First Lady Jill Biden was on the campaign trail this past week as well. Next, part of her visit to Atlanta, where she launched the campaign's Women for Biden initiative.
So it's no accident that Georgia is where we've chosen to launch the Women for Biden, because 4 years ago, Georgia, you put us in the White House. And Joe and I will never forget how hard you worked for us and how much you gave. So we're grateful. And that's why I wanted to start here in the place that lifted us over the top. So thank you very much for being here today. We are the first generation in half a century to give our daughters a country with fewer rights than we had. Book bans, voting laws gutted, court decisions that strip away our most basic freedoms. But circumstances is not destiny. 4 years ago, critics said that we couldn't win. But here in Georgia, they told us that a Democrat hadn't won in 30 years. But Georgia, you know what? You proved them wrong. And you know what? Women are going to do it again. Because we know what's at stake. I've been so proud of how Joe has placed women at the center of his agenda, starting with his historic pick for Vice President, Kamala Harris. The first but not the last. President Biden is defending reproductive rights, fighting for a national law that would restore Roe's protections. And yes, that means protecting IVF and access to contraception. accomplished so much more, making child care more affordable, creating access to maternal health services, appointing Ketanji Brown Jackson and passing historic gun safety laws. My husband is the author of the Violence Against Women Act, and I saw him write that bill on reams of yellow legal paper by hand, and he spent his entire career lifting up women. But Donald Trump, he spent a lifetime tearing us down and devaluing our existence. He mocks women's bodies, disrespects our accomplishments, and brags about assault. Now he's bragging about killing Roe v. Wade. Just last night, he took credit again for enabling states like Georgia to pass cruel abortion bans that are taking away the right of women to make their own health care decisions. How far will he go? When will he stop? You know the answer. He won't. He won't. He said it himself last night in his own words. He's considering a national abortion ban. Donald Trump is dangerous to women and to our families. We simply cannot let him win. We can't wake up on November 6th like we did in 2016, terrified of the future ahead of us, thinking, oh my God, what just happened? What are we going to do now? We must re-elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So how are we going to do it? Well, just look around you. Women for Biden-Harris. We're going to do what we did in 2020 and 2022. We're going to talk to our friends and we're going to tell them why this election is so important. We're going to tell them what's at stake. Sign up for phone banks and canvassing shifts. We're going to meet this moment as if our rights are at risk, because they are. As if our democracy is on the line, because it is. We will decide our future. Because here's the thing about men like Donald Trump. They underestimate our power because they don't understand it. They see how we lead through collaboration by empowering others. They see that as weakness. But we know that our community is our strength. They see our empathy and our compassion as vulnerability. But we know that what gives us the clarity to fight, we fight for what is right. They think our love for our children makes us soft. But we know that these are the lives that light a fire in our hearts, that makes us fierce and unafraid.
Democrat Jason Palmer was the surprise winner of the American Samoa Democratic Presidential Caucus this Super Tuesday. While residents of American Samoa aren't allowed to vote in the presidential election, as they're not considered citizens, members of the Democratic Party are able to participate in the party's presidential caucus. Mr. Palmer took 51 of the 91 ballots cast in that caucus, netting him 3 of the territory's 6 delegates to this summer's Democratic National Convention in Chicago. While not a household name, he's no stranger to C-SPAN's cameras. He was one of the dozens of candidates we covered in December at the Lesser Known Candidates Forum in Manchester, New Hampshire. Next, some of Mr. Palmer's appearance at that event.
America needs an upgrade. Our country is entangled in too many foreign wars. Our Congress is completely dysfunctional. Our borders are being overrun, and our leadership is geriatric. It's time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans, like the people at this table, who are standing up and putting their hat in the ring. We need people that understand new technologies and understand the 21st century while remaining committed to the values that are eternal here in America: liberty, justice for all, the pursuit of happiness. I'm a unique candidate submitting myself for public service. I have been working in the world of business and philanthropy and with colleges and universities for the last 25 years of my life. I've worked at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I've been a turnaround leader. I've invested in more than 20 entrepreneurs who have created more than 1,000 jobs and $1 billion in market capitalization. We need someone who actually knows how to fix things and bring solutions to this country. That's what I've done over the course of my life. I've architected a platform that's based on 3 pillars that I want to briefly explain to you.
You got about 20 seconds to do it.
And I will do it in 20 seconds. The first is conscious capitalism. There is a way, invented here in New England, to reorganize our economy around B corporations instead of C corporations. We can invest in our people first and upskill them for jobs of the 21st century, and we can modernize government. But it's only something that we can do together.
Hi. As Mr. Cornejo just mentioned, we're here just a day after gunmen killed 3 people and wounded a 4th in Nevada, and just a few weeks after, right here in New Hampshire, a security guard at a psychiatric hospital was shot and killed. What, if anything, needs to happen at the federal level to prevent this kind of violence?
So this issue is why 90% of young Americans are tuning out of our politics. This issue has occurred over and over and over again in schools across America, and we have not come up with a bipartisan plan to resolve it. I have a bipartisan plan to resolve it. It's called gun violence reduction. It respects the Second Amendment and the right of people to bear arms, but it also focuses on evidence-based solutions that we know work to reduce gun violence. Those include things like gun training for new gun owners. Those include things like preventing semi-automatic weapons from being in the homes of people who've been convicted of domestic violence. Those involve red flag laws related to the mental health of individuals. You'll notice that I'm saying this very calmly, and the reason why is because people get very inflamed over this issue, but there is a bipartisan, evidence-based way to solve this problem, and as president, I intend to solve it within the first year of my administration.
Mr. Palmer, you referenced an end to endless war, so we'll start this question with you. Regarding the war in Gaza, should the U.S. be insisting upon an extended ceasefire in order to get all the American hostages out of Israel, or should we defer to the military and political leadership of Israel as to how to go forward?
As a Quaker by background, I think that all life is precious and every life has value. So a ceasefire is what the United States should be recommending with regards to the Israeli-Gaza conflict. We need to do everything in our power to minimize the loss of life. This conflict has been going on for decades, and America keeps kicking the can down the road. We need to show true leadership here. The Hamas terrorists who committed these atrocities must be brought to justice, but not at the expense of the Palestinian people. Both the Israelis and the Palestinians are living under corrupt governments. We can hold 2 thoughts in our head at the same time, and we need to focus on the loss of life.
3-term Democratic Congressman Dean Phillips dropped his bid for the presidency this week. The New York Times and others reported that in doing so, he endorsed President Biden's re-election bid, which he had earlier criticized due to the president's age. Super Tuesday also marked a turning point in California's U.S. Senate race, as voters whittled down the field of candidates to just two: Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff and Republican Steve Garvey, the former Los Angeles Dodgers and San Diego Padres player. Not making the cut were Democratic Representatives Katie Porter and Barbara Lee. Next, some of the victory speeches from Congressman Schiff and Mr. Garvey on Tuesday night as they turned their attention to the general election.
It looks like we're going to the general, ladies and gentlemen. I seem to recall, although it's a little hazy, that within hours of our announcement, a certain Kevin McCarthy kicked me off the Intelligence Committee. Yeah, that was my reaction, too. And then, at the urging and badgering of Donald Trump, the Republicans censured me for holding him accountable. I viewed it that way. And then Trump would attack me after rally after rally. And I think all those things were basically what we would call Wednesday. I want to thank... when I was working on the Senate side, when she was on the Senate side, I was working on the House side. But I also want to acknowledge again my great gratitude to all of my wonderful supporters. I want to acknowledge the right of our protesters, and I look forward to working with you all and onward to victory in November. Thank you very much, everybody.
Welcome to the California comeback. What you are all feeling tonight is what it's like to hit a walk-off home run. Kind of like San Diego in '84. Because the networks have called it, we're going on to the general election to face off against Adam Schiff. Keep in mind, this is the first game of a doubleheader. So keep the evening of November 5th open, as we will celebrate again. As we celebrate tonight, I want you to know that we haven't come this far to only go this far. When I stepped on the field for the Dodgers and the Padres, I didn't play for Democrats or Republicans or independents. I played for all the fans. And tonight, I'm running for all the people.
Colin Allred, the Democratic congressman representing the 32nd House District in Texas, also notched a win on Tuesday in the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate. He now faces the incumbent senator, Republican Ted Cruz. Next, a portion of Congressman Allred's victory speech from Tuesday evening.
Now, I'm a fourth-generation Texan. I was born and raised here in Dallas by a single mom who was a public school teacher. I went to school in Waco. My family's from Brownsville. I trained for the draft in Houston. I've served us in Congress now in my 6th year. And I can't tell you how much it means to me to be your nominee, to be the next senator from the great state of Texas. And while I will be the Democratic nominee, I want every Texan to know, whether you're a Democrat, an independent, or Republican, that I want you to be involved in this campaign, and I want to serve you in the United States Senate. Now, the truth is, the stakes really couldn't be any higher in this election. Our freedoms are under attack. We do have a crisis at the border that we have to respond to. Costs are still too high. We've had challenges before, and we'll have them again. But the fundamental reason that democracy works is that the people elect leaders to represent them and their interests, and to try to fix things for them, not to look out for themselves. We've had enough of that with Ted Cruz. It's time to go in a different direction. Our public servants should serve us, the public, not themselves or special interests. And there are public servants, and there's Ted Cruz. We all know who Ted is. When I was in the NFL, we had a term for guys like him. We called them me guys. And we don't have to be embarrassed by our senator. We can get a new one. And that's what this is all about. Like I said, I'm about as Texas as you get. If there's one thing I know about us as Texans, it's that we believe in freedom. And that's what this election is going to be all about, restoring our freedoms. Now, y'all know I'm a civil rights lawyer, so I have to talk about Dr. King. And he said that the ultimate measure of a leader isn't where they stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where they stand in the most challenging moments. We know where Ted Cruz stands when those moments come. When 30 million Texans are freezing in the dark, he decides to go to Cancun. When our democracy was under attack, he's hiding in a supply closet. After he was the one who whipped up the mob, we know where he stands. I want you to know that I will always stand with you. I will always put Texas first. I will always make sure that I'm keeping you in mind and not my own political future or any nonsense like that. We've had enough of that. We've had enough of me, guys. It's time to go back to believing in the power of we. We is much more powerful than me.
More news in this year's Senate races, this time from Arizona. Independent Senator Kyrsten Sinema announced she wouldn't be seeking re-election this year. That leaves a likely two-way race between Democratic Congressman Ruben Gallego and Republican Kari Lake. Next, two interviews with social media influencers with large followings of their political content. First, Isaias Hernandez, an environmental activist and progressive, and then Chrissy Clark, a reporter who specializes in covering undercovered stories with a conservative lens. Both have followings of hundreds of thousands on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and talked to C-SPAN about their work in the digital space and how they've carved out audiences in today's political environment.
Isaias Hernandez, you are mentioned in a Washington Post article with the headline, "What TikTok Activism Says About Democrats' Chances." What role are you playing on the platform?
Yeah, well, I think contributing to digital media literacy is a huge important thing for the upcoming elections and also where general citizens get their information today. Around 25% of people are actually learning about environmental related issues through social media, which traditional journalism like media accounts for a larger percentage, around 44%. And I think that it's important that younger generations are feeling captivated and also accessible to older adults that may not be in the politicians' routes right now, but are in positions where they can actually ask direct questions and that they can be a conduit for the government.
So when it comes to this literacy, what topics are you talking about? What do you want people to know about this upcoming election?
Yeah, so when it comes to literacy, I think it's important for people to understand what are the existing political issues that are very concerned for younger demographics. So Gen Z has reported issues like healthcare, women's rights, LGBT rights, climate as huge issues that are very deeply concerning for them. And one way I kind of communicate that is talking about the updated climate policies and routes that our US government is taking. So whether that's through the pausing of the new extended permits from the LNG projects that was announced by the Biden-Harris administration, or whether that's looking at the Inflation Reduction Act and how progresses around policies that were passed a few years ago are progressing. And I think it helps really capture a story for young people to understand that, systemic change or policy change doesn't happen within a day. It happens throughout years. And I think it's important that young people are able to grapple with that information.
How are fossil fuels funding Putin's war on Ukraine? Let's talk about it. I want to be clear up front, this war is not happening because of fossil fuels, but it is being funded by them. Russia is what is called a petrostate, which means that its economy runs almost entirely on oil and gas. In fact, Russia has been supplying more foreign crude oil to the United States than Saudi Arabia, and more than 1/3 of Europe's supply of natural gas comes from Russia. And those exports are what's funding Putin's devastating war on Ukraine. That's why it's such a big deal that President Biden just announced that the United States is cutting all Russian oil exports. This is a huge win for countering Putin in the long term, but it also means gas prices will keep going up in the short term, which is why Biden emphasized that the real key to energy independence is transitioning to a clean energy economy.
How many followers do you have?
Yeah, so collectively, I have around 200,000, around 50,000 on TikTok, and then 120,000 on Instagram.
Are you telling people who to vote for?
Yeah, I think that, when it comes to our 2024 Democratic elections, I think that the huge emphasis right now is to vote, is to get the information of which candidates are out there. And I think it's important to understand that I think when communicating this type of information, that we don't really portray a political figure as perfect, but rather looking at the existing policies that are being pushed and looking at the future policies that can be pushed. I think a lot of younger generations today have a lot of good critical questions for our administration. And I think it's really up to us to not so much give them a perfect picture, but to give them a realistic view of where our democracy is at. And I think allowing for that realistic storytelling to happen, I think that allows younger people to understand the nuance behind decisions that are being made politically in our country today.
There was a TikTok for Biden the last election cycle. Were you part of that group?
I'd say no. I think what I was part of though was a group that helped promote the Inflation Reduction Act, where a few climate creators were invited to talk about this huge climate legislative policy that was being implemented. And I think for me, it was really strong to see the commitments from the US government to actually pushing something climate related, since I know that often at times it seems delayed in which climate policies are being pushed. So I think to see a president that is committed to acknowledging the severity of the climate crisis is a huge step forward to helping move that needle.
Have you decided who you're voting for in 2024?
Yeah, I think I have decided who I want to vote for. Although it may not be my primary choice, I do think that I will be standing to support Joe Biden. Although I do have my critiques and huge criticisms around the decisions and the things that he's been acting upon, I do think that, my vote does matter. And I think that for a lot of people who may be afraid to vote this election cycle, I think it's recognizing the ways in which, our president does have a large influence in our policies, but also our local elections. And I think ensuring that local elections are also communicated from the ground up and ensuring that a lot of people can connect with local policies. So that allows them to understand that these local changes end up becoming large systemic changes. And I think, I think it's valid for a lot of young people to feel, disinvested from voting this year from the upcoming decisions that have happened with the Biden-Harris administration. But I also think it's valid for us to be realistic to say we are unhappy with the choice, but we will vote. And I think they need to hear that we're not perfect, but we will vote for you.
What issues on the climate, where are you critical of the Biden administration?
Well, I think I'm critical with the Biden administration is that they don't want to declare a climate emergency.
Excuse me? Excuse me. Excuse me, Mr. President. When are you going to be declaring a climate emergency? Because our people are dying and you continue to approve fossil fuel projects. Can you declare a climate emergency?
I've already declared a climate emergency, so please sit down.
Sit down, come on. You youth activists always kind of disturb things. Come on, can we do it properly? This is the government. We have to be acting civilly here. No, I won't sit down. And Mr. President, you referred to the climate crisis as an emergency, but you have failed to act and declare it under the National Emergencies Act. And declaring a climate emergency could allow key authorities to take rapidly bold action in an ever-warming planet that we're facing today.
Look, we've already made bold climate action by implementing the Inflation Reduction Act. It's been a huge investment for Americans to have green, clean energy jobs, and we're working together with other governments to have a sustainable future.
You can't get rid of us. We as young people are the ones going to be facing the highest rates of the climate crisis. If you don't declare a climate emergency, we're going to be all in trouble. God, do young people know how to even debate these days? We have to come together as one. Can you believe disturbing the president's time when we're trying to fight for a better future? Don't you agree with me that there's better ways to protest? I don't agree with disrupting. We have better ways to talk. I mean, I disagree with you. I actually agree with the youth climate activist that was escorted out here. In fact, many young people are the ones that are going to bear the future of the climate crisis. We'll be gone by then. And if you look at our own political party, many of them have been have received large amount of funding from fossil fuel industries. And for decades, scientists have been saying the climate crisis is going to get worse and it's going to cost the American economy billions of dollars. So when we tell young people to demand and to ask for action, isn't this a place that they should be? Where else should they be? I get it that we should get into politics and there's different ways to pass policies, but we don't have time, and the people in power right now, like Biden and other people, need to step up and to take action despite the controversial beliefs of different people around the world. I can't believe you're saying that. You know, screaming and chanting isn't going to create change. So maybe take advice from those who have been actually working for long. Alrighty then, bye. Enough. There's a time and place for everything, and we will continue to work together to declare a climate emergency. End of meeting.
For those voters that care about the climate, that issue is at the top of their list. Do you think the Biden administration gets their vote again in 2024? And if so, why? What has he done that environmentalists like?
I think within the environmental community, it's a split between half yes and half no. I think, for environmentalists, we tried to really include an intersectional view of how we are advocating for the future and safety for all humanity, all livelihoods. And I think things that have been unfolding geopolitically has been put a lot of stress within environmentalists. But I think when it comes to, ensuring the future of these climate legislations, I think the major concern is the leasing of new gas and oil permits to be in offshore drilling sites or even within public lands. I think that's a huge thing that a lot of climate voters want to make sure that that's not going to happen in the future. I think with the LNG project, it wasn't that all of the existing drilling projects or fossil fuel projects that were being built are halted. It just meant that the new permits that would have been issued are temporarily halted until environmental testing can be done. And I think there needs to be much more of those testing sites to be permitted. And also to ensure that, in my view, that we are developing a climate economy where we see the development of climate court right now that's happening. But I do think that they need to be accelerated at a very faster rate, knowing the fact that many Americans are worried to finding a good paying job, especially those who are working class or middle class Americans that are currently struggling with the current recession that we've been going through.
For the young voters on TikTok who care about the environment, what's your prediction on the enthusiasm level for a second term for Joe Biden?
I think with young people, we kind of are like, in a sense that it's not our first choice. He's not my first choice either. But I do think that realistically, like, it seems as if we're repeating 2020 again, where it's like we will see progress. I know that we will see a lot of things, but I do think that 2024 is very unique because I believe that a chunk of voters who supported him, even though they didn't like him, are absolutely on the fence now or have left that decision to even vote. And I would say that, from 2020 to 2024, I'm kind of in the position where it's like, it's not who I want to vote for, but I will vote for him. And that just represents that I'm willing to have more conversations with the Biden-Harris administration for them to improve. But I do think the messaging around the campaign right now is very focused on to defeat Trump more than a solutions-oriented mindset for America that actually allows us to reimagine or redesign democracy, rather than trying to push out this doomist narrative of, if that other candidate wins, then it's the end of the world. And I don't think Gen Z loves that narrative right now. It's not really inspiring for a lot of us to even think that there's action to be done for the environment.
Chrissy Clark, what role would you say you're playing on digital platforms in this campaign election?
Well, I'm not really out here necessarily attempting to influence the election. That's really not my job. My goal right now is to inform anybody, voters, non voters, literally anybody that will watch, the importance of stories that aren't getting pushed out in mainstream news outlets. So my platform really focuses on stories that you wouldn't get when you turn on mainstream cable news. And we did know that that played a large role underreported stories in the 2020 election. So while I'm not necessarily out there with the intent to impact the 2024 election, I'm sure reporting on stories that don't get covered in mainstream news outlets is still very important.
What impact did it have the last time around?
Well, I think with the New York Post story getting suppressed via the Hunter Biden laptop story, that was very important and pivotal. There were a lot of people in swing states, particularly Georgia and Michigan, who said they wouldn't have casted their ballot for Joe Biden had they known fully about what was going on with Hunter Biden. And I think that that's important. That was censored on big platforms, and the fact that it was censored on Twitter, TikTok, etc. It's important to talk about those things so that people and voters have a full scope of who they're voting for.
What platforms are you on, and who is your audience?
Yeah, I'm on all different types of platforms. I do TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever you call it nowadays. And I think my followers are really just interested, again, in hearing stories that they don't get when they turn on cable news.
I'm Christy Clark, and these are the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. Armed men, believed to be Mexican cartel members, were seen in video footage wearing body armor and crossing the southern border into Texas just unimpeded. Where are the gun control activists now? It's not okay for average American citizens to have their Second Amendment right, but the cartel from Mexico comes in and come on over, welcome to the country.
Just come right in.
Massachusetts is barring a Catholic couple from fostering children because their faith is considered not supportive to the LGBTQIA plus kids they may foster. In your wonky political news of the day, the House Oversight Committee released a new report on its investigation into the Biden family's influence peddling, and it uncovered over $20 million in payments from foreign sources to the Biden family and their business associates.
Oh my God.
Disney partnered with a gender-fluid influencer to market girls' clothes to little girls. Disney partnered with TikTok influencer Sean Altman, a biological man who identifies as gender-fluid, to market little girls' attire on social media. The American Academy of Pediatrics, which is the largest pediatric association in the nation, announced it will begin a review of its current gender-affirming care model. Let me know in the comments if you are hopeful that we will see change.
Particularly in my demographic ranges between the ages of 18 to 25. That's a huge demographic for my audience demographic right now. And I think that's important because those are people who are turning away from traditional cable news. They're not watching what our 60-year-old voters are watching. And so it's important that they're still getting the same clear information from a journalist, but also they like to be entertained. And so part of that is making journalism fun and interesting to people so that they're entertained. They're not scrolling away, because we know that our attention spans of the average American right now are 6 seconds. I think there are monkeys that have longer attention spans, and that's not an insult. I myself struggle with that as well.
What stories are you reporting on that you believe are not being reported on the mainstream media?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about a lot of things. One of the most difficult things I think to talk about honestly and earnestly is the issue of transgenderism, not necessarily talking about people's God-given choices to make their decision about how they would like to identify, but how it's being thrust on people via the government institutions. I also think it's really important to talk about detransitioners and the manifestos that they write, the importance of the things that they've gone through. It really doesn't get talked a lot about in mainstream media, and so I've tried to highlight some of those stories in my reporting as well.
How would you describe your political philosophy?
Yeah, I'm conservative, definitely right of center. But I think I align myself pretty well with a lot of independents in the sense that I don't necessarily vote for one party. I have registered as a Democrat, I've registered as an independent, I've registered as a Republican in all different states that I've lived in across my life. So I definitely lean towards the right, but I vote based on the principles that I feel if a candidate lives up to those principles, I'll vote for them. But there is no one party that perfectly encapsulates my ideology. So it's really a campaign by campaign kind of vote.
And what issues are you focusing on? I mean, have you endorsed a candidate, and what issues are you focusing on for this election cycle?
No, I don't endorse candidates. That's really not my job. My role is to be a journalist. And I think that I'm happy to be open about the fact that I have a bias. I lean a certain way. I think that's really important for all journalists to do. But I don't necessarily root for one individual candidate or necessarily against one individual candidate. I represent people's opinions on policy issues. So I might come across to the layman as maybe pro-Trump or anti-Biden, but that's not my intention. My intention is to be very clear that I agree with Trump's policies 8 out of 10 times. Do I agree with the way he delivers it? Not necessarily. But I, maybe agree with the way that Biden delivers it, but I don't agree with his policies. So I think it's very important to have that nuance, but that's a difficult, very tricky thing to get done in, say, a minute and 30 seconds when you're attempting to get a lot of information out in a very short period of time.
Are you talking about the constraints of the platforms that you're using?
Yeah, I mean, of course, you want to have videos where you can ramble on for an hour. I do live streams that last like an hour per se, but those never seem to get nearly as many clicks as a 30-second video with an opinion. It's crazy. I'll do a brand deal for a company and I'll literally just say a news story and then promote a company, and those videos will get millions of clicks. And then, I'll do a full news report on, the nuances and the balances of politics, and those seem to get no traction. So it really is interesting how you need to make things super quick and concise, and it's not necessarily the platforms that I opt to use. It's the way that people consume news nowadays.
Tell us about the process for putting your show together, your podcast, how you go about, producing what you are across these different platforms.
It's so fun. Honestly, it's a blast. I started off just taking my cell phone and literally, Greta, just, sitting there with it up and editing it on the TikTok platform. And that's how it started. And now I'm sitting here in a studio, very, very blessed, as you can see. But the process really is finding stories that I've rarely heard, I've ever heard. And I do that by reading all of the mainstream news sources as well to make sure and confirm that the story I'm giving my followers actually hasn't been reported on in mainstream news outlets or to the extent that I would like it to be. So I go through the whole process of reading the news, figuring out what's being talked about, what's not being talked about, more importantly, and then kind of put together a whole organization for the day of what I'd like to do with those stories, how I'd like to commentate on them, record it. I do all the editing myself, and then I post it to my social platforms, and people really look forward to it. It's something they're excited to get in their inbox every day.
Last, a look at some of our coverage from Plano, Texas. That's where independent presidential candidate Cornel West was meeting with voters. Here's some of his remarks on the ground in the Lone Star State.
We human beings, we are a wretched species too often. Much of our history is a history of organized greed and institutionalized hatred and routinized indifference to the suffering of vulnerable people, going back to the beginning of the species. And yet, there is this possibility, this potential, if we so choose as wretched people, to be wonderful, to be visionary, to be committed to love, to be committed to justice. The possibility of interruptions, the possibility of disruptions of the history of greed and hatred and domination and occupation and subjugation and degradation. And that's what we're here tonight to talk about. How do we become more fortified to be countervailing forces against all forms of organized greed, institutional hatred, and routinized indifference. 2024 were the very litmus test of some sense of morality in an overwhelming moment of barbarity and bestiality in Gaza becomes the fundamental criteria of what it means to have some morality and spirituality, not just in America, but in the world. And if you're silent on that, if you can't meet that test, shame on you. Shame on you. And when we look around, it's not just the younger generation, even though the younger generation is playing a very important part. But when you look around of who was really willing to straighten their backs up, not in the name of hatred and revenge, in the name of love and justice, that we stand with our Palestinian brothers and sisters in Gaza. How come? because we love Palestinians and we believe a Palestinian baby has exactly the same value and significance as any baby in the world, no matter what color, no matter what gender, whether it's in Texas, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in Sudan, whether it's in Ethiopia, Eritrea, Guatemala, across the board. Yes, yes, indeed. I see my dear brother David Whining. Oh, stand. Oh, just wave, brother, wave. Give it up for my dear brother David Whining and his magnificent wife. We go back 35 years. His brother Richard, his father Richard, and his mother Sylvia Ann Hewlett, that I was blessed to write books with, and we have so many memories together. And what do you find? Yes, among our precious Jewish brothers and sisters, magnificent spiritual renaissance, magnificent political awakening with Jewish voices for peace, and if not now, and a whole wave of Jewish brothers and sisters doing what? Deciding to choose integrity and honesty and decency and courage is never just a function of what your religious identity is. No, not at all. Just like it was never a question of skin pigmentation for black people. I support resistance. I support resilience. But that resistance and that resilience has to have a morality and a spirituality. You don't kill innocent folk or babies. I don't care where they are. I don't care what color they are. If you're gonna fight a war against combatants. He said, oh, Brother West, you so old school. That's right, I am. I'm an old school revolutionary Christian out of the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., and I'll debate, I will fight, but most importantly, I will always be in solidarity with those who are suffering, with oppressed peoples. And I recognize that every form of resistance and resilience when it comes to oppressed people takes a variety of forms. Sometimes it's violent, sometimes it's nonviolent. Absolutely, but there has to be a morality even of the oppressed. There has to be a spirituality even of the oppressed. And as we engage in our discourse, let us not in any way simply become mimics of the gangsters who would use military force against innocent folk day in and day out, and then the cowards in the White House, in the United Nations, in the Congress who enable it. Now, a lot of people have asked me, well, Brother Bush, you running for president and you call the president a war criminal. I said, yeah, that's me. I don't hate Biden. Pray for his family. You have to take responsibility for your actions. You tell Iran that they're fully responsible for providing arms to other nations, then you are fully responsible for providing arms for genocide and ethnic cleansing and supporting apartheid and acting as if it's the beacon of democracy. Where's the morality? Where's the spirituality? We ought to be full of righteous indignation. But that righteous indignation cannot simply be symbolic. We have to be willing not just to speak truth to power, not just to the relatively powerless, but we've got to be willing to speak the truth to ourselves.
Very lively and very outspoken, so it's fun to hear you.
It's just a blessing to get a chance to be here with you all.
I'm excited to hear you speak.
Well, I'm blessed to be here, I can tell you that. I'm blessed to be here. Thank you.
So what we're going to do is we're going to keep it going.
Thank you. We're going to finish up back. Ooh, Mona.
You remember me?
Mona.
Yes. Dr. West,
How you doing? Blessing to see you. I know we're going to finish up right quick.
I know. And then I think let's get him a photo of you two together, and then I'm going to sneak in and photobomb.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
God
for the
bless
amazing
you.
work. God bless you.
I'm a fan. Anybody who can take on Sean Hannity,
My dear sister.
I have followed you for years. I
My
never thought
God.
I'd get a chance to
But
meet
I
you.
thank you,
God
and I
bless you.
salute you
We
too.
appreciate your support for our community, for humanity, for the African, for everybody. I like the way you call everybody brother and sister. That's the way it should be.
No, I salute you now, my dear sister. All right, now.
A reminder, this program and all of C-SPAN's campaign 2024 coverage can be found online at cspan.org/campaign.